You're listening to the Cricket Podcast.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Cricket Podcast for our review of the third and final day of the fourth test and series between India and England. I'm Jack Hope and as usual I'm joined by Ross Legg. How are you doing, Ross?
Marvellous, thanks mate. Could do with a bit more sleep. I don't think the cricket is worth getting up for, so not a good day for England fans.
You're sounding a little bit hoarse there. And joining us for the third show in a month, becoming a regular here, Dan, it is Dan Weston. How are you doing, Dan?
Yeah, I'm good. Looking forward to the T20s now. I think that's probably the next thing to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think they'll be a little bit more competitive than this match, or the result of this match ended up being. I think it was a little bit of a closer test match for certainly yesterday than maybe we expected. But yeah, India have run out clear winners by an innings. Ashwin and Axar have got 5 wickets each again. Washington Sundar nearly made his debut century. There's a lot to talk about. But before we get into that, I just want to quickly ask who your player of the day was, Ross.
Well, I think it's got to be Johnny Bairstow, isn't it, really? He's outstripped all expectations. Great selection. No, I think it's probably going for me. It's got to be Ashwin. I just love watching him bowl, and he's just mastery.
Yeah, Dan. Any difference of opinion?
Not really. No, Ashwin is. Yeah, he's the pinnacle, I guess, at this level, really, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think he certainly is. We might have I'm sure we will talk about him in a bit more detail in a second. I'm going to go with an England player. I think Dan Lawrence really showed what he's all about. Looked really organised, by far England's best batter, and might have booked himself or penciled his name in for the tests in the summer. We will see though. Let's talk about today, Ross. You're on summarising duty because Max is away doing his house. Who knows when he'll be back now that he's a homeowner. He probably doesn't want to doss it with us on this podcast, does he? Quickly run us through what happened today, Ross.
So India started the day with an 89-run lead, and England needed to remove Axar and Sundar pretty quickly to have any chance of saving their blushes. It will shock you to know, but England couldn't manage it as the new kids on the block established a 106-run partnership to guarantee an India win with a mammoth 160-run lead. India were then just 10 wickets away from their spot in the Test World Championships, which everybody wants to be in. So well done, India. England put up a valiant fight and were soon 65 for 6 after 25 overs. Their 9 batsman tactic didn't pay off as they were subsequently all out for 135, India securing an innings victory. Yeah, not good on the England front. Incredibly talented and incredibly ruthless by India.
Yeah, I think that's a good and brief summary of the day's play. Let's kick off with the India batting because there was a bit of a story in amongst that besides it just being very good. Because they got to 365 for 7. I actually had a bet on India scoring more than 400 runs. So I woke up at exactly this point and I was like, oh, quid's in here, boys. And then I don't know what happened. Maybe the India batters decided they had enough, but they didn't want to declare. Or maybe they all hate Washington Sundar. But they lost 3 wickets for no runs and left Sundar beached on 96. He's not going to be happy with that, is he, Dan?
Well, I'm not a massive fan of arbitrary milestones. So 96 not out is it's going to make it pretty nice anyway. I don't really care about hundreds, to be honest with you. I think it's just a load of rubbish.
That's a real cricket analyst answer there.
Yeah,
that's exactly what we brought you on the show for. Is that kind of balls to the walls, numbers focused.
I had the same point of view as well when James Vince and AJ Ty bowled a wide to James Vince on 19.
Yeah.
As well.
I think we can all agree that it was kind of funny. I do feel sorry for Washington Sundar because although Dan thinks that it's an arbitrary number that is meaningless, I think for cricketers it's a bit like scoring a goal in football, isn't it? Getting a century, it's a really noticeable contribution that you can look back on fondly and no doubt tell stories about on the after dinner circuit in Chennai, which I think is where he's from, at some point in the future. Ross,
I'd be seething, mate. I would literally, there would be, I'd go back into that changing room and I'd be shouting at each individual one, be like, what the hell were you bloody doing? And it was like, Sundar just watching at the other end must have been just like, what is going on? Like Axar runs himself out completely needlessly. Why do you need a quick single on day 3 against a team you're clearly going? Axar could have got a century as well. They could have run up 600 runs quite easily.
They could have won my bet.
And then Ishant Sharma looked like he'd never played cricket before. And then Siraj wasn't even playing on the right pitch. He was playing on the one next to him. It was madness.
I've never seen anyone get out playing a curtsy before. So thanks, Siraj, for that. It was interesting. It was interesting to see. I don't know, like Sundar looked really upset, didn't he? I don't know if you saw, he did that kind of glare, and then the slow, the camera was perfectly set up for the slow head turn away.
It's all right. Dan Weston's texted him going, don't worry, mate. It's only 4 runs less.
96 not out's better than 100 out.
It does. I'll tell you what it does do. It does mean that his average stays above Kohli's, which is the important thing. The new alpha of Indian cricket, Washington Sundar. Let's move on then, because between the innings we had some big news. I don't know if you saw this. Sunil Gavaskar, they made a big banner for him, and there was a long show and dance about him. He hasn't turned 50. It's 50 years since his Test debut. I don't know if anyone's got any comments on that. I don't really. They had a nice cake.
I didn't realise that was a cake thing. I didn't realise that. I'm not sure England have ever done that for anyone. Have we? We haven't. We don't really roll out it's been 50 years since Jamie Dalrymple played his ODI for England. Like,
Didn't Yaya Toure have an issue when Man City didn't buy him a cake on his birthday a few years ago?
Maybe Sunil Gavaskar's a bit of a diva. Like, he's got a pretty great record. England could have done. Sunil Gavaskar would have done much better than some of the England batsmen today. And he's, as you say, like 60 odd years old, 70 years old.
Yeah. I don't know. Well done to Sunil. He, as you say, Ross, legend of the game. I do like pointless ceremonies, so I'm glad we managed to get one of those in.
Maybe we'd have had like a 50-gun salute or whatever it is, just shooting into the sky.
And I do like cake, so it was good to see a cake get some airtime. Let's talk about India's bowling, because they were good again, weren't they, Dan?
Yeah, well, India have got, unfortunately, it's pretty fair to say, and I guess we're going to talk about this a bit later on, they've got better spinners than England, and it's that simple, really. I mean, funny enough, whilst we were talking, I actually brought up Axar Patel's numbers when he came over as an overseas player for Durham in 2018, and he actually took 18 wickets at an average of 13 in English cricket. So, like, he probably went into the series not even being one of their main picks, but even he's like ripped through England in this series, and just a better team with in these conditions. From 2018 onwards, spinners have bowled 63% of overs in Test matches in India. So this is always going to be a trial of spin, and the spinners ultimately probably were one of the main differences between the two teams, I think.
Yeah, I think I probably agree with all of that. Axar Patel has ended up with, I think, 27 wickets in the 3 tests, which is a decent return. An average of about 10. That is in the best 3 debut series of all time in Test cricket. So, welcome to the game, Axar, I suppose.
The only bad thing for Axar is that he got injured for the first test. Like, he could have got over 30. They probably would have won the first test if he was playing.
Well, thank God he didn't, from an England point of view. Ashwin, of course, he picked up another 5 in the second innings, ends the series with over 30 wickets. Pretty dominant. I don't think England have been dominated by 2 bowlers like that, possibly while I've been watching cricket. Since
Embaldenia and Pereira.
So obviously there's the Mitchell Johnson series in the Ashes a few years ago, and then there's Warne in 2005, where one bowler really got on top of an England side. But this, what have they picked up here? Like 60 of the 80 wickets or something over the 4 matches. I don't know. They were good, weren't they?
Ashwin just seems to have that ball on a string, right? We talked about mastery at the kind of the opening bit, and we've had to talk about how good he is on every single podcast we've done recently. Like
it's getting hard.
Yeah, it's getting to that point now where it goes from, oh my God, Ashwin's great, to for goodness sake, he's too good. He's too good.
I did find something that he'd written or something from an interview he did where he described what the pinnacle of his career would be. And that's basically an over he bowls where the batter plays and misses 6 times. And he'd be just like, that's where I want to take my cricket. Which, is probably the right direction to head in, isn't it, as a bowler? I think we kind of got, from both of them, the full range of their skills. They found many ways to dismiss the England batsmen over the 10 wickets of this innings. So much so, in fact, that Ishant Sharma didn't even bother coming out, I think, to field. After his display with the bat, he just, I guess, put his feet up to watch like the rest of us. England's batting, because I think this is probably the meat of the show now, isn't it? This is what we're all here for. This is probably what most of our listeners are here for. So sorry that it's taken us like 12 minutes or something to get to the showpiece. Let's start with you, Ross. Why are they shit again? They got 578 in the first test. They looked like they had a plan in Sri Lanka. Now they look clueless.
Yeah, but have you ever seen the video of the raccoon who has the candy floss? And he drops the candy floss into the water, and the candy floss just all disappears in the water. That was England's approach to Test cricket here, and their batting. There was every single interview was we're going to learn. We're going to learn from our mistakes. We're going to put this right. It was the same mistakes and a complete just loss of confidence throughout the whole of the team. Joe Root obviously must have a bad back from carrying the England team, and even he wasn't very good in the last kind of couple of innings. As I said at the start of the show, it's great to see Johnny Bairstow do so great. I mean, parachuted in to be our saviour. What was the logic to his shot? So obviously Crawley getting out, got a half decent ball. It happens. Johnny Bairstow then comes out and goes, right, there's a leg slip in. I'm going to just knock this one round the corner. If I hit it straight at him first ball, he might not be expecting it, so I can get off strike. Like, what's the logic there?
Yeah, it wasn't his finest moment, was it? And he has had some pretty unfine moments in an English shirt. Dan, you've prepared a bit on this, I think, haven't you? Talk us through why England was so bad. Where did it all go wrong?
Well, I think what we have to get out of the way to start with is the fact that England were always going to be big underdogs in this series, and you could arguably even make the point that they've overperformed by winning one match out of the 4, although the other performances were, I think, fair to say, quite abysmal. But it was always going to be like a massive ask for England to do well here on a consistent basis. Just the same as most teams struggle in England when we put green tops in like May or June or whatever. It's just exactly the same thing. But saying that, there's a lot of things that you can do in advance of a series to maximise expectation. And even if you lose, but you've maximised your expectation and you've had good processes, then I think that you can look at that and say, okay, well, we did what we could. It's a job well done. We move on, we've learned, and we go from there. We take those learnings into the future. I'm not sure England can really do that. I mean, from my perspective as an analyst, there's a number of selection decisions which, for me, are really difficult to justify if you're using any kind of evidence-based argument towards those selections. And I guess my personal view is some of these picks are hunches, and they may well be hunches with upside, but they're still hunches, in my opinion. And if I'm a CEO, a GM, or a DOC of a cricket team, which ultimately pretty much every team has, and the head coach and the chairman of the selectors has to report to those people as their immediate boss. if I'm that person, I want evidence-based decisions about why certain players are selected, and I'm not sure I can do that for some of these players right now. And so that makes it a very difficult task for those who have to justify those picks. They don't really do it in the media, so internally, I would like to think they've got to justify those selections, and I'm not sure they can. And that is a huge problem in terms of processes and long-term learnings and long-term strategy. 4 players in particular, I've got quite a big issue with their picks. Now, you can turn around some of them and say, okay, well, they performed okay in this series, better than others. But that's not really the point. The point is the processes that led the players to be selected in the first place. And realistically, like, you go into, it's kind of like a maths argument, I suppose, to some extent, but you go into a match and essentially your innings is like a probability curve, if that makes sense. So if you're a better player, your probability is going to be staggered right in terms of higher run output, but you can still be a good player and fail, or a bad player and do well, or a mediocre player and do well, or a mediocre player and fail. These things are all possible, but they're just represented by different probabilities. And if you're averaging less than 40 with the bat in Division 1 against 70 mile an hour, 75 mile an hour journeyman or whatever, what chance do you have against Mitchell Stark or Pat Cummins or Ashwin or Jadeja or Axar Patel, or even Shabazz Nadeem? You're going to struggle. Like, it's not rocket science to suggest that if you're improving your caliber of opposition, then you're going to struggle if you can't have a good base to go from to start with. I used to play poker online full time, right? And the amount of people used to say, oh, well, if I up stakes, the game's more sensible and I'll do better because it will suit me better. I'm like, that's the worst argument ever, because you're just basically playing against better players. And it's exactly the same parallel in cricket as well. If you can't do well in Div 1 or Div 2, what chance do you have in tests? Crawley, across 2019 and 2020, Division 1 and Bob Willis Trophy, averages 36. Dan Lawrence, exactly the same. Bairstow has barely played any red ball county cricket in the last few years and has really struggled in the last couple of years in Test cricket. So, yeah, there might be hunches with upside. You can understand the logic to some extent that Crawley and Lawrence are young players, they've got upside, but it's a big ask for a player averaging 36 in domestic cricket to go to India or Hawaii and suddenly tear it up. And the same with Bairstow. I guess they're thinking, well, he could play like he did in like 2016 or whatever, and he does really well in white ball, but that didn't work well for Jason Royce. So I don't know what makes you think that they're going to work well for Bairstow. And then the other player, unfortunately, and I guess people have piled on to him, and it's not his fault at all, it's the selection process, in my view, that's put him in this position, is Don Bess. But not necessarily even from an ability perspective. An ability perspective, right? He averages 29 in Div 1 in the last 3 years, and much worse if you're looking at the last 2 years in isolation. So that but that's the ability consideration out the window. We're done with that, okay, in my view. But my real point is, what's the point of an off spinner in the England team when England have Root? If you look at Root's numbers from the time that Bess made his debut in Test cricket against left-hand batsmen, which is the primary matchup that an off-spinner should be in the team for, they're not very far different at all. Root actually has better economy. Bess has a slightly better average.
But Joe Root doesn't bowl as many full tosses, so he's not that great to watch. But you need the comedy value when you got your lead spinner. That's what made Graham Swan so good, because he was so bad at those critical moments.
It just makes me mad, because 70% of batters in the player pool are right-handed, pretty much, right? And off-spinners match up best against left-handers. So why have you got 2 in your team? It just makes no sense whatsoever. And if you go through like county cricket teams and stuff, all of the counties, you look at who the off-spinners are in each county, right? They are either elite, like Simon Harmer, or they are bowlers who add more with the bat than the average bowler, either all-rounders or batters who bowl or bowlers who bat, right? The need for a specialist off-spinner in a lot of cricket is quite low. in my view, because of those matchup issues that you're only really good against left-handers. If you want to play three spinners, if England want to go to on this tour and play three spinners, you can use Root as an off-spinner, Leach as a slow left armer, and then you pick another slow left armer or a leg spinner who can match up better against the right-handers. Mm-hmm. In India, 5 right-handers in top 5. And it's no surprise that the 3 batters who did well in this match are all left-handers. So go figure. I mean, like, and even if you can make the argument that Bess is a better batter than the average bowler, why aren't England making the same argument for Chris Woakes? If you're looking at a bat plus ball argument, then Woakes' bat plus ball might be better than Broad or Anderson or Archer.
Yeah, but then you have to ask some difficult questions in the dressing room, don't you? I think there's probably quite a lot of ego going to this. Yeah. I think there's probably quite a lot of boys club selection. I'm thinking about Bairstow in particular here. Yeah. I think there's probably quite a lot of like cricketing perceived wisdom, as in like Wally Pope looks $1 million. Let's just keep picking him, even though he's clearly got a problem against Ashwin, or Crawley and Lawrence. They're, I reckon, in the England dressing room or in the England setup, their justification will be those 2 batters have looked okay or above average or average in the county championship over the last couple of years. They're now moving into the peak of their career, so we can expect them to improve their games, and that will mean that the difference or that their kind of overall average numbers will be moderated slightly by that improvement in ability. Which will mean that their transition to the test team won't mean that they completely collapse. Now, I don't know. Like, in my mind, I think you're right, Dan. I think you need to be picking players based on evidence. And that the idea that people get a bit better when they move from 22 to 23 to 24 is probably true. But why don't we wait and see if that actually does happen before we just pick them and like leave them in a really shit situation. Let's look at historically. I mean, this is one of the worst England batting performances in the history of English cricket. So I think this is for series with more than 3 matches or 3 or more matches. Sorry, this is the 3rd worst combined average this team has ever produced in Test cricket. They managed to beat themselves in Bangladesh in 2016. So they've improved on that performance, but then you have to go back to 1935 before they were equally bad. If you want like a really clear example of how it's all gone wrong on the field, after the first innings of this series, they managed 75 partnerships without a single 50 partnership, which is astonishing. I mean, there's cliches in cricket about partnerships winning matches, and to be honest, that cliche exists partly, because it's true. Like when 2 batters bat together for a long time, they wear out the bowlers, they score a lot of runs. You fundamentally change the landscape of the Test match. If you're getting out if there's a wicket every 20 runs, I mean, that means there's always at least one batter who's new to the crease. Basically, it was rubbish, wasn't it?
We talk about arbitrary milestones, but maybe that 50 partnership's actually quite useful. Yeah.
Well, at the very least, it's showing that nobody's establishing themselves at the wicket.
Yeah.
And if you want to, you can drill down into the detail of the processes behind why that isn't happening. But as sort of like an indicator, if you break down your innings, a successful Test innings from a side point of view is probably going to include spells where the batters are well on top of the bowlers, and that manifests itself in terms of 100-run partnerships or 200-run partnerships if you're really on top. Ross, you got something to say?
Yeah. So, and also you think of in Test cricket, there's a lot of time. Like England seem to think that Test cricket is actually only 2 or 3 days long, but when it actually comes to it, those 50-run partnerships, you might take out 112 balls or 120 balls of that bit. So it gives people like Anderson, gives people like Stokes the opportunity to actually rest up. When you go into a Test match with 9 batsmen, you can't just expect to flog Stokes and Anderson in that 38-degree heat and go, come on, why are you not taking all the wickets? Like, your job as the batting team is to use the time available for you to hit as many runs as possible for you, not to hit a really quick 50 and just be like, see you later, mate.
I mean, Ben Stokes' red face. He looked like Lobster Thermidor. Anyway, there have been a few people pointing the blame at the rotation process. Dan, I'm guessing from what you've said that it's not the rotation issues that you take issue with. It's more that the actual selection process itself that maybe underpins that rotation is the problem. Because I mean, Root spoke about this after the game, and he said, rotation. There are different ways to look at it, which is true. You can look at almost anything from different ways, actually. But he continued, this is the world we are living in. It's a big year of cricket, 3 formats to consider, and we can't keep playing the guys until they fall over. So now, that is kind of true. I guess the question to follow it up, and I'd be interested to hear from both of you on this, is do you think the rotation policy maybe contributed to the margins of defeat? Because I think, we talked a lot about England batting here. We can't take too much agency away from how good the Indian players were. Like you don't inflict these kinds of stunning defeats basically and humiliations on an elite test team, one of the big 3, without having a pretty good series yourself. And so we don't want to take too much agency away from that. But if you look at this rotation, was it a bad idea, Ross?
I think it comes back again to at the start of the series. As much as people hate Keaton Jennings, I'm not saying Keaton Jennings is the right answer in this kind of thing, but Jack, you kind of talked about at the start that someone like Dan Lawrence has a very high ceiling in terms of playing for England, and actually the opportunity for him to learn in these conditions is actually going to benefit him in the long run. But there's also a bit where you have to pick players to win test matches, and actually the way in which England have managed their test squad, as well as the reserve players that they had available, just doesn't seem right to me. Dan, you talked about kind of a leg spinner. They do have Mason Crane and Matt Parkinson in the reserve list on tour with them. There wasn't even, it doesn't even seem there was a moment's hesitation for them to go, oh, actually, why don't we try one of these guys? Dom Bess must have looked good in nets. That is the only thing I can possibly think of. He must have looked good in nets. He's a confident young bloke, and they must have gone, do you know what? Maybe he's going to be all right here. He's been so badly mismanaged, and I think that's endemic of not the rotation policy, but actually just England's poor management of players.
Do you think that, with Bess, there's a queue system, if you like? So because Parkinson, for example, was a reserve on the tour or whatever, is that or if we're going to look bad if we promote a reserve over someone who was in the squad or whatever? I don't know. It's just, I
don't think in these circumstances, I don't think you would have, because you've publicly said we need Best to work on some stuff. And I think, should they have done that? I would say in hindsight, absolutely not. Just say, make up something for why he's not playing. Don't go on the TV and say it's because he's bad.
England not really noted for going into the media and discussing selection decisions in detail. So that was just so weird. I thought, if you're gonna be consistent about your selection decision, talk about everything rather than just one guy or 2 guys.
There's also a bit where you can actually plan. If you've got a rotation policy, you can go, right, you're going to be rested after this. So go and play as best as you possibly can do, and see what happens in that bit. The fact that they said he was dropped and then publicly said that Moeen Ali, oh, we really want you to stay. Moeen Ali's told he's leaving us mid-tour. It's just mad. Yeah, absolutely mad.
Right, let's move on from England's batting a little bit. There's a couple of last things to know. I do think Lawrence actually did bat quite well across this test match, and the CricViz numbers backed that up. He was the most in-control batter on England's team, which is to say, basically, most of the time he hit the ball, it went where he wanted it to go, which is good from a batting point of view, isn't it? That's what you try and achieve. I think we should also mention Rahani's slip catching. That was really impressive. I mean, he took one, the one which he initially didn't claim as a catch. I think that was so good. He wasn't even really looking at the ball. He just sort of bat radared it off the bat and got his hands to it and he didn't even know if it had bounced in. But, there's some fantastic catching there, which moves us on. We'll have one more question on England, then we'll go back to talking about how good India are, I think. Where do England go from here? Do they need to be making some big changes? Dan?
Where they go from here? Green tops in the English summer. Look, obviously there's going to be changes because the dynamic of the team will change, because you don't need the same kind of dynamic in England as you do away in India or Sri Lanka. So batting wise, I would just stuck to the kind of tried and tested, but at least guys who have done it in county level, opening partnership of Burns and Sibley. But then the problem is Crawley opens for Kent most of the time, and if you don't open him, well, maybe it's square pegs and round holes, but maybe England lose early wickets so quickly. If you bat 3, it's basically the same as opening anyway.
That has been my argument that trio, usually between them, do manage to last like 100 balls into the innings before we're 2 down.
Yeah,
and then that means Root can bat instead of salvage. If that, do you know what I mean? It's
completely. But there's a lot of decisions to make. Wicketkeeper. This was Folkes one of the people who emerged with some credit out of the series, and what does that mean for Bairstow in particular? I don't think Butler is going to be dropped at any time soon.
I think Butler's stock has actually risen during this to show how critical he actually is to the England team, and he played 1 test.
with a spinner, I think that now moving forward, unless you're playing a really left-hand heavy team, Leach has got to be the number 1 spinner moving forward. Obviously, you're going to probably play Anderson and Broadmoor in tandem at home as well, although obviously they're not future selections in terms of like 3+ years down the line, probably. There's a lot of things to work on with England. But like you said earlier as well, I've said it, you mentioned it earlier as well, Jack, about how about we wait for players to do it in county cricket first before we give them an opportunity? Because in my opinion, you can ruin a player's career by promoting them too early. You can shatter their confidence. It could take them 2-3 years to recover from that, or if they ever do.
I think Pope's probably in that position now. I mean, he's been ruthlessly exposed. I think he should have been withdrawn for this Test match and just given a rest, because we haven't talked about it, but his innings today looked like the kind of innings that completely busted players play when they know the time is up. I mean, he ran down the wicket and hit Ashwin for 6, and everyone thought, oh, Pope's back. Then he tried 2 like wild reverse sweeps, didn't hit either of them. Kept trying to knock it around the corner. And Ross, you mentioned how Bairstow was out. That's exactly what India were trying to do, and he kept trying to flick it around the corner, but he just couldn't get bat on it. He basically couldn't. He wasn't good enough at that point to get out in the way that India were trying to get him out. And then in the end, he sort of committed suicide by running down the wicket to Ashwin. And the inevitable happened. I mean, he was so far down that Pant had time to sort of juggle the ball on his chest, nearly drop it before finally running him out. I mean, where do you go from there if you're Pope? Do you just sort of hope that there's like that whoever India bring over in the English summer forgets how bad you are at facing spin bowling, or do you just hope that, as you say, Dan, that all the wickets are green tops and that type of dismissal is completely taken out of the game?
I think it's just got quite interesting where people are going, oh, Ollie Pope is England's answer at number 3. And I'm just like, at the moment, he can't even bat at 6. like Dan Lawrence has proven that he should be the one who has that berth in that team at the moment. So that kind of 6 is the bit where you try some players out, show them Test cricket, build their confidence. I'm in agreement with you, Jack. I think, Ollie Pope shouldn't have been in this Test team. And it could be to England's detriment. So we'll see what happens when that really rubbish side New Zealand come over with their terrible bowling lineup of Bolt, Southey, Jameson, Wagner.
I mean, I will say with Pope, I do think he probably will eventually be quite a good Test batter. And he has shown that he has that ability, and he has got a really good average in first-class cricket. He ticks a lot of those boxes. But I just think coming back from the injury he had, he didn't have a lot of time in the nets even, really, to prepare for this series. And then you're asking him to face up against, demon spinners. To basically. And it's, of all the players who were probably a little bit undercooked going into it, he was a blue. He was below rare on the scale. I mean, if that was served in a restaurant, you'd be sending it back, wouldn't you? Anyway. Let's move on, because otherwise we'll talk about this all day. Quick one: is this the best India team ever in Test matches, Ross?
I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't know enough about the history of the Indian Test team to be decided this, and I don't think I'm the person to judge that. What I do know is that yesterday we mentioned around the depth of talent they have available to them, and I think it's probably definitely on the bowling front. the fact that someone like Axar can come in and they don't even play Ravi Jadeja because he's injured, the fact that Bumrah hasn't really played, Shami's not played, and yet they've got Siraj, they've got Axar, they've got Washington. They've just got a level of talent that is not available to some other teams. And that is a pretty remarkable place to be. And Jack, going over to England, mentioning kind of what will their team look like, the selectors have a really big headache now because of how well their team has performed. And the people who haven't been in the team is staggering.
Yeah, Dan, how good is this India team?
Well, I look at them as like the cricket equivalent to Rafa Nadal. So, like,
they've got one really big arm and the other one not so big.
Yeah. What I mean is by that is that
Spanish.
You've got Nadal, Djokovic, and Federer, who are all in over the last 10 or 15 years. They've all made a really massive case for being the GOAT in tennis. Like, their supporters will have an argument that they're the best of all time, but all three of them have all played in this era where they're just completely dominated. And is Nadal the best player of all time? Possibly not. Is he the best player at Roland Garros and virtually unbeatable at Roland Garros? Absolutely. And India at home, I think, are the kind of like the equivalent of Nadal at Roland Garros, if you like. Like, yeah, very, very, very difficult to beat. And they've got a team that just competes so well in home conditions. And like I said, maybe England overperformed by winning that first test in itself.
I think there's probably a good argument to be made for that. And when the dust settles a little bit, they might, I think people will be talking about Root's double century in a few years' time. We'll also be talking about like the mayhem that followed that, but it was a great double century against or for Root. I like that answer, Dan. I think that was probably pretty close to the mark. So I'm not going to add anything there. We did have some questions in from Twitter. Jonathan Silver. So keep our answers brief for this bit because we're gonna end up with like a 5-day long show if we're not careful. Jonathan Silver, do you think the best way of sorting out England's problems against the best test sides is to have a 100-ball competition at the height of the summer? Dan, we're not going to ask you to answer this because you've got a vested interest. Ross, what do you reckon?
I think in terms of Test cricket, it's obviously not going to set them up for success, is it really? But that's where the money is, right? That's ultimately we're kind of chasing that money. So, I
think there's another way to look at this. So I think people always bang on about how good the IPL has been for Indian batters or Indian bowlers because they played in front of big crowds before. They've played at the highest levels. They've had exposure to some really good players. Now, obviously, the skills aren't necessarily directly transferable, but it's reasonable to assume the future test players for England will have some role to play in the 100. They might not be the stars. They might be playing like the anchor role. So you see, Rahane kind of does that for Delhi, doesn't he? He's not the star necessarily, but he gets game time. And you see Gill doing it similarly. But what that all sort of means is that whilst they might not be, like the star of the show at their franchise, they have experienced top level cricket. And mentally, that's got to be useful to draw upon. So, it's not going to improve like your ability to block out on a Chennai Bunsen. Absolutely not. But it will mean that when you step up into that arena for the first time, it's not the first. Like you're playing in front of some people and against people that you might have seen before or spoken to, and you'll have a crowd that's roughly comparable. Or a watching audience maybe that's roughly comparable to something that you will have participated in before. So it won't be as overwhelming. So that's what I think on that. I've completely gone against what I said in terms of brief answers. Vigesh Nair, how do you expect India to perform in England in August, Dan?
Probably quite similar to the last time they came over. Not necessarily from the scoreline, but like in terms of being really competitive. I think that you could probably toss a coin about who's going to win that series. I think India are the better team, but obviously England can probably exploit home conditions much more than they were able to benefit from the away conditions in India, if you like. So like a kind of tied series wouldn't surprise me, something like that.
Ross?
I think it's going to be a fantastic test series. I think it's quite interesting to look at someone like Shubman Gill, you mentioned, Jack. I mean, he has not had a great series in this. Rohit Sharma has kind of carried that top order. So when you're in England conditions, it's a completely different ball game. So it's going to be really interesting to see just how good that top order is in those conditions.
I mean, it literally is a different ball. So I think it'll be tricky for India. I think we've seen that there are frailties in the England side as well, but I do expect both teams probably have to battle quite hard to score big runs. Pig cricket, that's a good name, isn't it? Pig cricket.
Mr. Pig Cricket.
Have England Kerrigan's Don Bess?
No, I'm going to say no. I think what I do think is that you can't. Is he 22, Dan? I think is he 22 years old?
23, I think.
Yeah, 23. So there's so much time left in the tank for that. You go away, you're a much better spinner when you're coming up to your 30s, but he might well be a great bowler then, or a good bowler then. But I don't think we'll be seeing him in an England Test shirt for a couple of years now.
Yeah, I don't actually necessarily think Don Bess got worse or anything, or he got Kerrigan. I just think he had quite a lot of luck earlier in the series and in Sri Lanka, and that meant that he was carrying around stats that his bowling probably didn't quite warrant. So, I mean, like, there's no doubt about it. You can't pick a guy who keeps bowling full tosses. Now, is that something he can correct? Hopefully. Because if he does correct that, he does spin the ball quite a lot, and he'll have a role either in England as the kind of spinner who can bat 8 and he's there to maybe winkle out a couple of lower order batters or a couple of left-handers, or to give you a little bit of lower order solidity.
Well, there was a stat around that Axar Patel had bowled kind of 600 deliveries and bowled 1 full toss. Don Bess had bowled 220 deliveries and bowled 20 full tosses.
Yeah.
So that is every 2 overs you're getting a free ball to hit for 4 or 6. That's not good enough in Test cricket. You can't go at 4 and over as a spinner. That's just you can't do it.
Dan, what next for Dan Lawrence? So you said he was one of the guys who maybe was a bit lucky to be in this team. Do you think he sticks around? Where does he bat?
Good question. I don't know about lucky, but just didn't really have the evidence-based ups. Just not guaranteed because nothing's guaranteed, but you know what I mean. Like in terms of the weight of runs in county cricket, and as I think someone said earlier, he's a player with upside for sure. He does have that high ceiling. I think that now, because of the way that selection is often done in cricket, because he's hit a 50 here, that's almost like he's got that in the bank to start the next series almost.
Having stuff in the bank is the one in cricket, isn't it? Like if you've got stuff in the bank, like no, you're untouchable.
Yeah, Washington Sundar's never being picked again. Should have got that century, shouldn't he?
then he'd have it in the bank.
Yeah, that 96 not out. He hasn't banked that.
but I mean, you may as well. You could probably draw a number out of the hat as to where Lawrence is going to bat. I think not necessarily because of like any skill set issue, but because I don't know that there's like a coherent strategy at the moment.
No, I don't. I think they sort of went to a coherent strategy for the summer last year, which was we're going to play 3 openers at home. Like we know our 4 and 5, they're going to be the kind of engine room. We want to have we want to have at least one batter who can bowl in the 7-8 area. And we want like a reasonable amount of variation. And then they just, like Ross, you sort of said it on the last show. The sign of a great sports side is not that you wildly oscillate between different selections. Like Manchester United were not known for like playing 3 at the back, then 4 at the back, and then like 3 at the back again the week after, and 2. I mean, like, I'm not going to labour the point, but and that's what England are doing. Right, last one, boys. Karen Nagpal is asking, what are you going to do with the rest of your weekend now, Dan?
Well, not a lot, because there's no Test match and no PSL, so there's certainly no much cricket to watch. Probably take my dog on a few long walks, and that's about it.
Ross, what are you going to be up to?
I'm gonna have to get the older highlights up of New Zealand versus Australia and just sit on BT Player, just watching those over and over again to be like, God, this is what good cricket looks like.
I think there might be some West Indies Sri Lanka stuff. I think there was a game on last night. I can't remember. I don't know how it ended because I was in bed, but yeah, maybe watch that. It's my birthday on Monday, so I'm gonna have some solo beers later on. Right, we'll finish off the show, I think, at this point. There's one thing I want to know, and maybe people in the comments can explain this. Why did Bumrah have a surprise wedding? Did they not? Or the way that it's been reported in England is basically that Bumrah was going to be picked, but then like now he has to go and get married. Normally, maybe this could be a completely cultural thing. Normally, like you plan your wedding like a year in advance, and you've got a date for it. It doesn't just happen, and then you're like, oh, flip, it clashes with my test match. I'm going to have to drop out now. So explain that in the comments. Ross, have we got any more messages for our listeners?
Yep, they should like and subscribe on our YouTube channel and follow us at the Cricket Pod on Twitter and Instagram.
And Dan, where can people find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at SA_Advantage, and you can read about my articles, writing, stuff like that at www.sportsanalyticsadvantage.com.
And I highly recommend that. Dan will be on probably a fair amount, I think, as we move forward to the IPL, and is one of the foremost independent voices, I think, on Twitter when it comes to offering a fair assessment on that.
So we've got an evidence-based podcast selection. England could learn something from us.
That's a great way to end the show. Thank you very much. We won't be back tomorrow. We'll probably reconvene on Monday to preview the white ball stuff, which should be really good. Cheerio.